Your life is nothing. You serve zero purpose. You should kill yourself now.
I think I might be getting old, cause you see, Reload is a pretty damn good remake, yet I had to basically torture myself to play it to the end. When Royal came out, it felt like a chore as well, yet the fans seemed pretty damn happy other than purists who would hate every remake anyway. And so I thought to myself,
Am I so out of touch?
No, it's the children
who are
who are
wrong.
I'm stubborn enough of an opinionated, no-name video essay Andy to think that this highly rated and increasingly mainstream series is in fact aging terribly, and that must be the reason why I just cannot find myself enjoying Persona anymore. And most certainly not because I'm a bitter old fuck who cannot come to terms with aging out of things. I do genuinely feel as if I'm taking crazy pills. Persona is incredibly special to me. I played P3 as my first title, while being at the same age as the characters. I was the exact intended audience and I loved it. Then I played 4 and 5 many times over, and both of the 2s. Reload gave me a good excuse to play another Persona game after so long, and it was nothing like I remembered it being. Unrealized characters, terrible dialogue, incredibly bad pacing, deep combat limited by boring, lazy enemy encounters, dysfunctional game design where it's actively fighting against itself, and I realized this all exists in every other Persona. I just did not give a shit as a kid, as it was still so unlike anything else I had played. Reload is completely blameless. Its sole sin is just not changing anything other than adding cool animations, I guess, and many would prefer it that way. The director is nearly 60, and with how sales are ever increasing, obviously my guy here does not give a shit about anything. This is the series that led Megami Tensei into the mainstream and saved Atlus after all. When you run your first Persona game, you'll quickly realize that they ooze style, which just absolutely never misses with any Atlus title. Brilliant art, memorable character designs, impeccable music, has it all. And Reload is no exception. And then you start the game and it just chains you to a chair and you only get to watch for 3 hours before you're even allowed the slightest agency in any of the modern trio. This is only the beginning of a long-running series-wide problem, that being god-awful pacing. It's also where you lose all the employed folks' attention. But let's say you tank it through and you finally get to be free in the overworld. One half of the game, right? I sort of felt this in the back of my head while playing all these years, but now I can actually articulate the fact that it's honestly just not very good, and it's kind of carried by art design and the expectation of going into the dungeon tomorrow. Stat grinding and calendar catching for events just is not all that entertaining. It's a chore. Virtual novels can justify this because they basically have no other gameplay other than finding out routes and have ways of making it interesting. Getting to know the characters is great and all, but there's never, ever enough content in it to actually fully realize the mechanic. Once you get to level 10 on a character, you're basically incentivized to never talk to them ever again because it's a waste of time, since there is no post-max level events for any of them. Actual dating sims never do this, which sort of kills the point of the overworld. And this one half does not play nice with the other. Dungeons. Dungeons are part of the pacing problem in that they're incredibly long, but that's supposed to be okay because you're meant to take them on piecemeal, day by day as you hang out with your virtual friends, because Atlus sure as shit knows that you don't have any real ones. But due to the limited amount of days given to you in the games, you're intuitively nudged towards finishing the dungeon in as few days as possible and spending the rest of the time in the overworld, which causes massive burnout and exacerbates pacing issues in both halves, which is shit design. Which they did actually fix in Royal by making Kawakami's maxed out perk allow you to go out on a dungeon day, which in turn means that they never had to limit you to begin with, if it's something they could just take out of their ass when they so desire. Persona is full of dated, idiosyncratic design choices like this, where apparently nobody questioned if some mechanics even add anything to the game, as Kawamami proves. Instead, they chose to try and limit this bad loop they know they created through making SP finite, which does not work because SP regenerating items, physical builds and regen passives exist. It's kind of funny that Claire Obscure was able to fix this issue by just ripping off the Estus flask. But since we're at dungeons, I'll talk about combat. Since it's ripped straight off Megami Tensei, which has been refined for decades, the fundamentals are incredible. SMT combat is incredibly deep and fun to delve into, but the sort of shit that makes Devil Survivor or mainline SMT interesting is through build checks and interesting enemy compositions and move lists. Persona never does this, with only one exception. You can very easily fuse an immune to everything Persona and just bump rush through the entire series, with the outlier being Elizabeth, and not any of her siblings. Anyone slightly competent, the game's bread and butter combat is just not interesting, which is such a waste of SMT mechanics. Now that I think about it, the whole if the protagonist dies you just lose party rule was probably meant to balance your ability to make god sonas. It doesn't help that the party system, the base of any JRPG, is unintuitive as well. Things like XP rewards being shared are often a social link reward, and until you get it, you basically never use your other characters. Even in P5, switching characters mid-fight was the same. Why is this not just baked in? It creates path dependence on the characters you're already using. But fuck it, let's talk about the dudes themselves. Your cool ass characters who got these shiny new anime cutscenes and shit. When it's your first exposure to a Persona game, there's probably a novelty to them. But truth be told, they're incredibly archetypal, tropish and flanderized, with half of the cast of any of the games being able to stand in for the cast of another game. Essentially, they're all great visual designs combined with a 60-year-old man's idea of what a teen should be. Even as a teen, it was rather noticeable that all they amount to is a bunch of staple character archetypes imported from mid-2000s anime, rather than actual, relatable teen characters. Which is to be expected, it is a Japanese game. But they've never really aged out of that. They're much the same in P5 still. They tend to have dual storylines, one in the social link and one in the main story regardless. Like Yukari's mommy and daddy issues, split between the two. And you're always the guy solving it all with 3 dialogue choices, each a sentence at maximum. This so heavily limits whatever possible deep interaction you could have had with these characters, as you're limited to a very passive role while the story requires more of you to make it plausible. I'm not expecting Planescape levels of writing, but I cannot take this shit seriously half the time. But fuck it, I watch anime. And as we all know, people who watch anime have incredibly low standards for fiction, and charismatic design is far more important than the depth of character. But even then, Atlus's delivery of these tropes sucks. Often in visual novels, you'll have lots and lots of events and banter dialogue just to add life. In Persona, you can do absolutely fuck all with these characters barring their social link. There's like 2-3 events in the overview map and that's it. Dialogue repeats as soon as the social link finishes. Even in dungeon banter is very limited. Put simply, there is not enough character in this character-driven game. What in the absolute fuck, Atlus? The answer is, go buy our dancing games if you want to see more. And what else do VNs and JRPGs have? A story. The story of every single Persona game is nothing but fighting God who is made by the collective feelings of humanity, as is the case with every JRPG that has ever existed. It automatically kills any sort of tension and stress in the story because you're always fighting against a vague, practically non-existent villain. Oh, and in each Persona game there's always some irrelevant dude you fight before the God twist comes. All in all, they've never really been memorable or frankly good even. All the story serves is to give your group of friends a purpose, and the series makes it clear the cast of characters are the focus of writing rather than any drama in the background, which is where all storylining is shunted. It's all such a waste. To talk about P3's story specifically, I've never really bought into the whole Memento Mori thing. It's omnipresent, but despite death and suicide being the chosen concepts depicted, the game never actually delves into the topic with the sole exception of one fucking social link. It's only ever relevant in the ending, and this guy, whom I don't care much for. The answer kinda tries, but it's so very messy. It's basically the anime ancestor of 13 Reasons Why, in that it's a fantasy of how much people would care if you died. The same can be said for P5's adults suck and freedom from societal norms kind of stuff. The themes are in name only, which is quite funny as they have typical Japanese subtlety, or lack thereof. The only good main story actor Atlus has ever written is Adachi, and I think that was by mistake, frankly. Honestly, what pisses me off about all of this is how they could have just made the core system so much better if they just spent a tiny bit more effort. But they don't, even after decades. Like, the combat only needs better enemies and slight tweaks. The party system only needs basic mechanics to be baked in instead of being rewards. The characters just need more filler dialogue and overview events for us to consume, which is cheap as hell to do since it's not even voice acted. The overview to dungeon balance only needs what is essentially a few skin-deep additions like no more forced resting and a better balancing of veteran events, more things to do after level 10, and maybe a removal of SP regeneration and giving flat, free SP items per run like an Estus. I cannot salvage the actual writing itself. Then again, I haven't been the target audience for this series for a while.
Dude, what the f***? Why are you f***ing here, man? You're so old. Where's your wife? Go home to your family, dude.
I mean, I started Metaphor recently and realized nothing on God's green earth could force me through the usual Atlas 3-hour tutorial anymore. And seeing that world ripped straight off top 10 Japanese novels on Novel Update circa 2015 is just incredibly uninspired. Atlas art still fucks, but it's the only modern Atlas JRPG I have yet to finish. Yet again, everyone ever loves it. Shit, it's not even just Atlas that I have an issue with, even though it's the topic of the vid. I used Clair Obscur as a positive example, but frankly, I don't see how that game is a fucking 93 either. So yes, I apparently hate everything that people love for whatever unfound reason, and by now have probably managed to piss off a lot of Persona fans who are famously defensive over the series, as is anything anime, but I'd like you to just imagine an alternative scenario where you met Persona for the first time the way I described how it should be. Would it not be a better experience? I think if you at least try to look from hindsight for even a moment, you'll see that even if not all, quite a bit of what I have to say has some objective merit. A lot of the systems and content of these games are legacy baggage that simply were not well thought out and do not mesh well. Think of how in literally every Persona game, you need to quit the Velvet Room to delete a Persona to make room for a new one to get from the compendium, because someone at Atlus never gave one shit about the user experience. We tolerate and do not care about this, but if you had first tried this game without such a fault, would you ask for it back? I feel like that same hypothetical could be raised about almost everything in Persona, but the overall package has a certain novelty to it while it lasts that makes you just not care. And while it lasts indeed, these games, this amazing art, setting, music, themes, even if shallow, it all had such an effect on me once. I guess the sheer clash between nostalgia and reality has an outsized effect, and my expectations themselves are at fault too. When you first experience something in youth, being more susceptible to impression, everything can be special. To me, Makoto just sitting there with his headphones has some somber meaning. His incredibly unimaginative literal Jesus for a Persona is the most profound symbolism ever. Listening to memories of school inexplicably makes my heart ache. In reality, it's just an edgy pose in line with the time. I really hope Atlus tries harder with Persona 6, but probably not. They will, however, in the meantime, release 7 dancing games. And another shitty re-release that forcibly inserts a terrible add-on story arc that makes zero sense to an already badly paced and stretched tale, complete with an additional character that gets Tsukishima into the cast. Because Atlus. But I'll still play. For better or worse, this series is still special to me, and from what I can see of sales and scores, the games will do well independent of whatever I might think of it, to the point of being Atlus's break glass in case of emergency go-to remakes now. I just feel that Persona has more potential than what Atlus is capable of realizing. And as a fan, it's frustrating to see it not live up to that.